Hello. We are venturing on to the last lesson of this unit. And if you remember all the way back to our first lesson we drew a picture of like what is statistics. And if you go back to that, remember that the very last part of that diagram, that little picture was a little like magnifying glass that looks in on the sample, and that act of looking in on a sample that you have grabbed is the act of statistics. So our first lesson was what is data? What's all the different type of data we can have? Our second lesson was what are all the different types of ways we can, and then how we can gather that data. And then our second lesson was then, okay, how can we represent that data in tables or in graphs? And now we're saying, okay, how do we use these tables and these graphs of these data in order to then start calculating and analyzing the data that we've grabbed? This lesson is statistics. Measures of central tendency and spread is kind of like your introduction into statistics. These are really fancy words for saying central tendency. Where is it all grouped? Is it grouped in one spot? Is it not really grouped at all? Where is it grouped in terms of the data? And then spread is how far out it goes. It's really fancy words for just saying like, what does the data look like? And so we're going to start with central tendency. And central tendency are these three things. I'm sure you've heard of them before. I'm sure you've calculated them before. But the main idea here is that these three things are three different ways to measure central tendency, three different ways to look at and think of where is the data grouped. You can think about mean, which is the average of all of the numbers. Really quickly, your average or your mean, you're going to see in IB is represented like this. We're going to start talking about it like this. It's just a weird way of writing mean, and it's X with this bar up top. You might also see it represented as a formula. You do not have to memorize the formula. It's not in your formula packet, but you will be using your calculator for all of these calculations. Your calculator does all the things with statistics that you need. So we just need to start learning how to use our calculator. But just in case you ever see the formula and you're like, what the frickety frack is that? So it starts with the sum of, which makes sense because the average of something is when you add up all the things and then divide by how many you added. And remember that this guy is the sum, if you remember from sequences and series. So the sum, I equals 1 all the way up to n. So we start at 1 and then we go up to n. And then it just says x sub I. X sub I, what this means, and then it's all over n. So dividing by how many things you counted up, right? So x sub I means you take the first term, the second term, and then you add all the way up to x sub n. So you're adding up all of the terms. X sub 1 is when you do 1 n for I. So kind of remembering how we talked about series in that way. And then you divide by how many numbers you added up. It's a really fancy way for writing out that this is what you do. But again, you won't ever be calculating it by hand because your calculator will do it for you. Okay, so the mean is one way to measure central tendency or to talk about central tendency, but it's not always the best way to talk about central tendency. Sometimes we can talk about how the data is all grouped together by talking about the median. And the median is the value that lies exactly in the middle. So I did this on purpose, realized that the median is exactly in the middle of these two guys. So if you're like a visual learner, try and think about like, oh, that's right. Median was in the middle of the definitions. Also, if you think about a median on a road, if you've ever heard of that reference before, you're like, oh, it's the median. And it's the little like pathway or the little garden spot that's like in between two major roads. So it's like one road and one way is going this way and one way is going that way. In the middle, there might be like a path or trees or things like that. It's called a median, and that just is the very middle of the road. So any way that you can try and remember that. If you happen to have two numbers that are in the exact middle of the data, there's no number in between, you end up with two numbers when you're crossing off all the things at the end to get to the very middle. It's just the average of those two numbers. So the average of the middle two. Okay. The mode is just the data point or the data set. that occurs most frequently. So it's just whatever one pops up the most. All right, so let's go ahead and practice this. We are going to practice it only with our calculator. So please, please, please remember to be bringing your calculator to class. I'm going to show you how to use the calculator on my screen. So hopefully that'll be just a little bit easier for you to see. So keep these notes to the side. I will be reading off of them, but you just won't see them anymore. So we have this set of data, and we want to find the mean, the median, and the mode, state which one of the measures is the most appropriate. And it says pocket money in euros for 21 grade 6 students per month. So I'm going to go over to my, I'm going to hide this guy. I'm going to go over to this. Okay, so let's first just go to the home screen. So this is the home screen. In order to do statistics, we need to start focusing on the list spreadsheet, guys. So we're no longer doing the graphing calculator aspect. We're no longer doing the calculate section of the graphing calculator. We're going to focus on the list and spreadsheets. So if you click on that, it'll open this up. I've already got 3 tabs in here. If you want to add a new tab, you can go, I think, doc, yeah, and then insert, and then list and spreadsheet. If you wanted to add a calculator into these tabs, this is when you can start like creating a tab in your or creating a document in your calculator that has all these different things that you might need. But you're only going to need lists. All 3 of these for me are lists. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is in column A, it was highlighted because if you go up and you keep clicking up all the way till it's highlighted, and press delete, it deletes everything. If you have a TI 84, I want you to go to Cognity and go to the chapter that deals with finding central tendency and spread, and there is a document on there that you can pull up that shows you how to do it, or you can click on YouTube and say how to do this. I will not be explaining it. I will only be explaining it using the the TI Inspire. So it's if you have a TI 84, you need to go figure it out. But there's lots of resources available to you online to do that. Okay, so I want you to then input all of the points of data that we have. So we have 10, enter, 10, enter, 10, enter, 15, 15, 15, 15, and so on, and enter in all of the points of data. Okay, once you have entered in all of those points of data, I want you to now go to Menu, Statistics, Stat Calculations, One Variable Statistics. I will do that again. Menu, Statistics, Stat Calculations, One Variable Statistics, and then you press Enter. X1 list is what am I calculating stuff for? What am I calculating mean, median, and mode for this situation? And the list that we've created was in A. Now you cannot just delete everything and write A. You have to have A and then these little brackets to the side. How you find them is they're right here. They're in the blue. So you have to press Control and then click that guy. Frequency list we won't worry about right now, but we will in a couple seconds. You want the results to go into B. So put them in B. If it's not empty, then it's going to ask you if you want to override what's there. So you'll delete anything that's there if you have other data input there. So just make sure that if that's where you want to put it, that list is empty, or move it somewhere else. And then you click Enter. And then it gives you a ton of information, right? So you see this X bar guy, that is your mean. So we found our mean. I'm writing it on my piece of paper. We can maybe toggle. Let's see what we can do this. Okay, so my mean is X bar, so that's going to be 33.25. My median is also represented here. If you scroll down, you will find median, and your median is 27.5. It's 27.5 because it ends up being between 25 and 30. When you go and cross them all off, your two middle points of data, you don't have one, you have two. You just have to find the average of the two, and that is the average. Your calculator does not give you mode, but that's something you can just grab from your data right away. We've got 3 50s, we've got 3 10s, but we've got 4 15s. So we're going to take those 4 15s, that's the most amount of 15s that we have. So our mode is 15 because that was the number that popped up the most. All right. So going back to this guy, it says we want to state which of these measures seem to be appropriate for the situation. So this means like look at your data. Notice that the mode is 15 and it's really, really low on our data, right? It doesn't, if we were to say like, oh, 15 is going to represent this data as a whole, I would say that that's grossly underrepresenting this amount of data because we've got all the way up to 100, right? And most of our data is above 15. So if I were to say like 15 is a number that represents this data the most, you would be like, well, but not really, because there's lots of data that's very, very different from that. And it's not in the middle of the data, it's skewed to the side of the data. So I would say that the mode is not an accurate representation. However, the mean and the median, which are very close together, which is good, the mean and the median are within this range right here. Sorry, this range right here. And that's about the middle of our data, right? It's about the middle point exactly, but it's also the average of everything. So they both seem to accurately represent the data, as in like there's some things that are widely different. 110 are also both widely different. Although I would say like 80 and 10 are so much so widely different from this data here that they might be considered outliers in this situation because they are vastly different. From like, I mean, 50, 100, double of 50, right? And it's they're within the same, we're going to talk about this later, but they're within the same quartile or percentile of data. And so since you have such a wide range in the same quartile, that means that there's not a lot going on, or that it's not an accurate representation. So I would say that the mean and the median are accurate. Okay,